Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Sunday Messages, and happy Valentine's Day. Little known fact, some of you might know this, some of you might not. My favorite holiday is actually Valentine's Day. So, first of all, the colors, red and pink, yes, I'm about it, love it. Second of all, it is not a family holiday. It is something you get to choose what you do for the holiday. So you can spend it with friends, you can spend it with family, you can spend it with your kids, you can spend it with your lover if you have one of those. You can do literally whatever you want with Valentine's Day. You can make it an anti-Valentine's Day. You can make it more of a heartbreak theme. You can do whatever you want. It's completely customizable. The color scheme is bomb. It's amazing. And I just feel like this is hands down the most underrated holiday in the calendar year. And on top of that, it's a holiday about love. I don't actually know the full story about where the Valentine's Day originated. I don't know the history of it. However, in the contemporary sense, Valentine's Day is about love. That is the meaning that we have placed upon it. And so when you have an entire day that is dedicated to love, are you kidding me? That's amazing. That is way better than all of the other holidays that we have. And so, because today is Love Day after all, I thought that I would talk about love. I thought I would deliver a podcast all about love. So I'm sure some of you have heard my story, and I've talked about this on my Instagram before. I've done other content about this. The most difficult thing for me in this life, the biggest pain point for me, the area where I have had to do the most healing, the most work, has absolutely been around love and relationships. That has been, without a doubt, the area that I have had to be the most intentional about. I've had to do the most work around. And with that, obviously comes wisdom. So keep in mind that the area where you struggle the most is often where the most wisdom is found. Because if things come naturally to you, if there is no practice, it's much more difficult to articulate all of the growth points to someone if you haven't been through them yourself. So for example, if you haven't experienced poverty or you haven't been exposed to poverty, but you want to teach someone how to evolve out of poverty, you're going to have a really hard time doing that because you can't speak to the exact stages of their growth depending on where they're at. And the same goes for anything else. If you can't speak to the exact stage of development where someone is at, you're going to be missing that wisdom. You're going to be missing that code, that information that that person needs in that moment. And one of the things for myself in this area of my life is I have almost no one that I can really talk to who understands my experience when it comes to love, or people who can really relate to my attachment issues. So not only has my situation, my dating life, my romantic history been very unique and abnormal and unconventional, all of those things is what I've been navigating. Not only that, but it sounds like I'm speaking a foreign language when I describe the things that I experience to someone else. And my healing process has been particularly lonely because of this reason. It's like everyone that I talk to has not had the experience that I have, doesn't have the attachment issues that I've had to navigate and heal from. And so there's a lot of misunderstanding that comes up. And so I really don't talk to anyone about it. The only person that I talk to about it is my best friend, because even though she has a pretty much the polar opposite experience that I do, she has a really, really excellent gift for space holding. That's number one. She's a great space holder. She's very non-judgmental, and she understands the unconventional nature of how I've had to navigate this over the years. So my experience with love has actually been quite lonely and bizarre and a whole bunch of other adjectives that I will spare you. But the silver lining is that I have had to explore all of these nooks and crannies when it comes to love, because in many ways, this area of my life felt like a really foreign concept, and I didn't have very much exposure to healthy love or proper unconditional love. I'm going to talk about unconditional love today in this episode because I know that's a very misunderstood concept, but I really want to bring that in the episode today. So anyway, the gift in all of this is because love felt like this elusive thing that I was never truly exposed to or never really immersed in or never experienced from my parents. There were all sorts of voids that I had sitting out in front of me and misunderstandings about this whole love thing. It felt like a complete and utter abstraction to me. I did not understand it. So yes, it made it very difficult, but it also inspired my hunting, my desire to discover, my desire to explore. And with all of that, I essentially started reconstructing my understanding of love from ground zero. I remember there was even a certain point where I asked someone, I said, can you describe to me the feeling of love? Can you explain to me what that is? And really think about this for a second. If I told you, explain love, explain the energy of love, there's actually very few words, in my opinion, that can fully capture the sensation or the feeling or the energy of love. But when I was asking this question to someone, this happened a couple of years ago, she actually had a really good answer. She said, love feels like your heart. So then this got me thinking further. In order to really access the feeling of love on a regular and consistent basis, you have to actually tap into and develop a stronger connection to your own heart. This is the internal part of the process, because a lot of the time when people are thinking about experiencing love, they're thinking about love being projected to them through another person, through love relationships, through having fans, through something else. But a lot of the time it's, I want to be showered in love through other people, and then I'll feel good, or then I'll feel secure, and then. Where the actual experience of love comes from a connection to your own heart. So the more disconnected you are from your heart, the less you're going to be able to feel it when someone is projecting love towards you. And the less potent it will feel when you are flowing love to someone else. Because think in terms of energetic flow, or you can imagine light, or you can imagine water, whatever makes sense to you. If you think about flowing light, flowing energy, flowing water, you can imagine in order for it to feel loving, that it needs to pass through the heart center of your body. So it needs to pass through the center of your chest. And that is both the portal for it to come in and for it to flow out. So after having that conversation, and then the energetics of it really clicked for me. And of course, I see things in a very visual, imagination-based way. And I see things in energetics. That's always how I'm viewing the world and interpreting things. It's energetics. So once that really landed for me, then the connection process began. So the connection piece might just look like you holding your heart. So just putting your hand on your chest, you can do it right now. Simply sitting, breathing, being with your own heart. And that's actually where my practice started. It just started with being with my own heart, being with my own heart, being with my own heart. Because here's the thing that people seem to forget when it comes to love. As I said, the more disconnected from your heart you are, the less sensitive you are going to be when people are flowing it to you. So if you're super, super, super disconnected from your heart and I start showering you in love, you are not going to fully feel it. You are not going to really allow it to land. Part of this is because people go too fast. And the other part of this is that there's somewhat of a tone of shame or embarrassment or fear around receiving an opening to compliments or to love or to all of these things. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm sure you can go poke around in your own family of origin and then start just investigating why, if you feel inspired to do that. But for a lot of you, it was because of the conditional love thing. So receiving love for many people who are listening right now came with ties, or it came attached to things like performance, behavior, all of these things where it was really through this lens of conditionality. And so now allowing yourself to receive actually feels conditional. It feels like this is actually something where I'm setting myself up for a transaction. Or for some of you, if you're really abused, this is the part that comes after I've been abused. This is, I've just been punched in the mouth and now I get flowers. And of course, I don't mean that literally necessarily. It's more of the emotional abuse or mistreatment. So the associations that we have with receiving love can get really funky. But the good news is that the reality of receiving love as an adult is that you actually have a say in whether or not you receive love in a conditional way or an unconditional way. So if you are continuing the pattern of only receiving love from your mother in a conditional way, if you're receiving love in exchange for behavior or life choices or career path or partner choices or anything of the sort, if it's being done in a conditional way and you continue to engage in that dynamic, you are opting for conditional love. That is a choice that you are making as an adult. And you actually have a say in whether or not you are participating in relationships that are from a space of conditional love. When we're kids, we don't have that choice. Being a child is the most powerless experience that you have in your lifetime. And there are very few exceptions to this. But for the vast majority of you, your childhood was actually where you experienced the most powerlessness. And the thing that I keep coming back to in my work with people is let your adulthood liberate you. For whatever reason, people have forgotten that adulthood really did give them freedom of choice unlike ever before. Adulthood has given you all of these things that you may not have had access to as a child. Full autonomy, full sovereignty, full freedom of choice, full freedom to make decisions, full freedom to set standards, full freedom to set the tone for how you receive love and what you set boundaries around. You're in charge. You're in charge. And the thing is, this whole love thing, how you receive love, the conditions in which you receive love are set and maintained by you. I can say with a great deal of knowing and a great deal of experience that this is not something that is just the luck of the draw. That is not how this works. This love thing has to do with your relationship to your heart. It has to do with your desires, and then it has to do with your willingness to position yourself in a way where you're creating an ecosystem and an environment where you're receiving the quality of love that you want. Now, let's also take into consideration the different flavors and textures of love. Romantic love and platonic love and familial love and your love relationship with nature and your love relationship with animals. These are all different love practices, we could say. We could call them just different ways that you are experiencing the practice of flowing and receiving love. And they all have value. They all are of service, because you can imagine if you are simply in the practice of flowing love to animals or flowing love to nature or flowing love to friends or operating from that heart-centered space, that is going to completely reconstruct your relationship with love. In my personal life, in my experience, romantic love is extremely triggering for me. It's really rough to start there. I was not able to start there personally. That was too difficult. That was too touchy. I was too sensitive. I was too avoidant. Like, there was too much bullshit going on in my nervous system where that was just not the right starting place for me. So you want to use the other angles of your life to, I think sparring is the wrong word, to use it as a playground or use it as a sandbox for yourself. Even though there's a lot more value than just do it for the sake of getting practice. That's definitely not what ends up happening. You're not practicing flowing love for the sake of practice. You're not developing a relationship with your heart for the sake of practice. And you're not developing a relationship with your heart and reconstructing love simply as a means to an end. You're not doing it just for the sake of doing it or just doing it to get in some practice time. That's not the point here. But I will say, I know many of you are listening to this with a desire for romantic love. So own that part. Of course, yes, full agreement, by the way. Full agreement for everything you want and more. Yes, 100%. But understand this has to do with comfort. It has to do with receptivity. It has to do with so many more dimensions of what will become useful in the context of romantic love. But the starting place is going to vary for many of you. And some of you who are listening to this right now might actually feel like you're all set with the partner that you have. You feel really good in the partnership that you have, but the loving energy is something that can extend into other things. Like maybe you're not feeling love and adoration in friendships. So maybe you're not feeling very receptive in more of the platonic dynamics or in familial relationships. There's all sorts of different places where this can be practiced and where it can be sharpened, so to speak. So just understand that what you have going on with your relationship to your own heart is going to determine what you have reflected back to you when it comes to love. So that was essentially the first chunk of love that I worked on and that I navigated for a long time. The second piece actually took me by surprise. So back towards the end of 2020, I got the ping to do this class called Cosmic Council. And essentially, I had a whole bunch of different guides, gods, goddesses, historical figures, fictional figures, like just all sorts of different guides that wanted to be a part of that class. And one day I was sitting in meditation and Marilyn Monroe appeared. And at first I was a little bit skeptical or dismissive because I didn't fully understand the wisdom that she brought, or I didn't understand what she was really guiding me or why she even stepped into the container at all. because my perception of her was just very shallow, and I didn't know her history very well. I just didn't know very much. And during that time where I was constructing Cosmic Council, I would sit with all of the guides, individually, and just get information. I would just gather their wisdom. I would kind of interview them, if that makes sense. And it became really, really clear that Marilyn's purpose was love. Like, that is actually her dominant lens that she held in her lifetime. The other piece is that when she was in her earth body, she was running a lot of high frequency feminine archetypes. So she was holding a very strong lover archetype. This is why when you're thinking of Marilyn Monroe, a lot of you are probably thinking about either her sexuality, what she did for, we could call it the liberation of feminine sexuality. I'm going to do a different episode on that, actually. I'm going to talk more specifically about how she did that. And you're also probably thinking about her romantic roles that she was holding in film. Or maybe you're thinking about her relationship to JFK. The reality for her was that she had so many prominent feminine archetypes. And then on top of that, you have her really bringing that lover archetype forward. That was a really big one for her. That made it so her emotions, she was an emotional authority in human design, in case you're wondering. So her heart was really front facing, her love was really front facing, her sexuality was really front facing, her love was really front facing, and everything that she projected really came from the heart. And a lot of the things that she received came through the heart. So she's living in this high frequency love context a lot of the time. Of course, there are situations and circumstances where she broke from that, where she slipped out of that. She was more in human mode. But we can say with absolute certainty that the legacy that Marilyn Monroe left was about love. It was about romance. It was about that high frequency femininity and these highly feminine archetypes that she brought through and was channeling through her body. Now, of course, when I initially met her, when I made contact with her in meditation, that was not my perspective, okay? This is only my perspective because I've been working with her heavily for over a year. So as it turned out, even though she wanted to be a part of that class, her guidance was primarily for me. She was absolutely the guide that landed with me the most, resonated with me the most, and she ended up filling in so many gaps that I had in my own perspective around love. And it was like the guide I never knew I needed. Not only that, but her ability to receive was quite remarkable. Quite remarkable. Her receptivity was the type of receptivity to big things, big manifestations that made her a legend. So oh my God, I could talk about her for hours. I'm not even joking. So if you don't already know, if you weren't in Confidence Codes, I'm launching a class with her right now. So the Lost Teachings of Marilyn Monroe, this is the first time I'm actually doing a class that isn't my own teachings from my life experience or my understanding of energetics. Now, I'm not calling it a channeled class because I think people conflate that with possession, and that's not what's happening here. It's not like my voice is going to change and my body is going to change. That's not what's happening here. But I am interpreting her teachings. So over the course of, it's been over a year now. It's been almost a year and a half that I've been working with her really heavily. We're talking hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. I have spent in meditation with her, compiling her wisdom. And so finally, I'm at the point where I'm delivering her teachings because, she doesn't have a physical body to do that herself. So I'm doing it for her, but all of the teachings are hers. This class is also very different because Marilyn has made all the decisions about how I launch it, what I say, what the modules are, the price. Everything has been chosen by her. She is actually leading it. I'm just following what she pings me to do. So the other way that she wanted this class to be designed is it's 4 weeks, but there's 2 classes per week. So the first class is a lecture, so where I explain her wisdom, I communicate her teaching. And the second class per week is a combination. It's like a Q&A and an embodiment practice. So we do all sorts of different embodiment practices that are related to the lecture that you had before. So it's really, really badass. It's really cool. It's very unique. I've never done anything like this before. So week 1 is Meet Marilyn. So it's just introducing you to her as a guide, as a lover, as this wildly, wildly high frequency feminine being. And clearing up a lot of the misunderstandings about her life, just all sorts of stuff. Because I've asked her about all sorts of different things that have happened or the stories that people have told about her and then gotten her take on it. So we're going to be doing a lot of that stuff, getting some of the history down. That way you have a really strong understanding of her essence. Then week 2, we have Life Imitates Art. So this is all about cultivating a beautiful life, manifesting a beautiful life, bringing a beauty through your own physical vessel, all things beauty, beautiful life, beautiful people, beautiful places, beautiful body, beautiful mind, beauty, beauty, beauty. Just immersing yourself in that energetically until the point where it does materialize for yourself. So that's going to be a really, really fun embodiment practice as well. I'm super excited for that. Week 3 is the relationship matrix. This is her perspective, her understanding, her teaching on love. She has blown my mind. Like, there are some things that she'll tell me about love and relationships where I'm like, what? That is like the polar opposite of what I've heard. And she has completely knocked my socks off with her perspective on relationships. And I can tell you she has single-handedly saved my relationship personally in many ways, completely changed my life around love and relationships. And then week 4 is the magic of receiving. And this is really going to open you up to all good things. So your ability to receive is really the gate to letting all of the good stuff in without the feminine ability to receive, because it's a feminine practice, right? Receiving is the feminine aspect of you, opening yourself to the point where the thing drops in. So this is one of the most crucial skills that you can develop in the feminine aspect of yourself so that you can actually open the gates, right? If you're constantly in closure, you're keeping a lot of stuff out. If you're constantly in fear, if you're constantly shutting down, you're keeping a lot of stuff out. And so this is her explanation, her perspective on staying open, on receiving, all of that good stuff. So if you're interested, I'll put the link to that in the show notes. I'll put it in the description box, all of the things. The link will be in my bio on Instagram if you follow me on there. If you're on my newsletter, I'll send you a link for it there. I'm going to be talking about it more and more, but we start on February 23rd. So if you're interested in that, this is all things love, femininity, relationships, receiving, beauty, all of the magical feminine archetypes and frequencies that she was able to embody, the magnetism that you have always, always wanted. What if you could just pour this essence, this magical feminine essence that she cultivated in her lifetime, if you could just pour that in your morning coffee? That is what I'm going to be bringing you in this class. It's going to be epic. I'm so, so, so excited. So check it out if you're interested. It is $777, and there is a payment plan available if you are interested in that. And again, we start on February 23rd. So you have 9 days left. There's 9 days left to get in. And also, just so you know, it is not going to be repackaged as a DIY offer. So just keep that in mind. It is not going to be self-paced. It's not going to turn into anything self-paced. It is a live class only. Lastly, let's open up this conversation about unconditional love. So I'll give you my definition of unconditional love, and then I will show you how it gets distorted. So my understanding, my interpretation, my feeling on unconditional love is that it is the divine love of God. So it has everything to do with God and almost nothing to do with humanity, if you will. This is a pure, loving energy that comes from one source. And it is also not something that is attached to anything in the 3D reality. So one of the things that we can do is we can look at our 3D reality and say, I love that. So for example, I'm looking at the flowers that are on my coffee table right now in my office, and I can love that. I can adore it. I can admire it. I can flow love to that, but understanding that it's coming from one source. It's coming from God. And that just happens to be moving through me and is getting projected onto the flowers. Okay, so the same thing would go for people. The love is coming from God. I'm just flowing it through my heart and to a person. That's essentially the energetics of it. Unconditional love is not never upsetting anyone. Unconditional love is not lacking boundaries. Unconditional love is not being a people pleaser. Unconditional love is not never setting boundaries around sex, right? There's all sorts of ways where this idea of I flow love through something that is not related to energetics, right? That is where it gets distorted. If you are perceiving flowing love to someone as I'm going to do this thing, or I'm going to spend this money, or I'm going to do something in the physical world, completely void of that energetic being tapped into God, that's not unconditional love, because you've separated yourself from unconditional love. If you're doing something that you don't want to do and calling it love, that's not love. You're operating under the energetic blueprint of obligation. You're operating under the energetic blueprint of codependency. That's not unconditional love. That is not the divine God energy that you have access to. That's not the same thing at all. This is also why you will not be able to quantify or evaluate love in terms of 3D action alone. It can't be done. Let's take money, for example. Money is a good one. So the act of giving someone $5,000, there is a potential for that $5,000 to be given from the energetic space of unconditional love. There's also a potential for it to be given from obligation, or it to be given out of fear, or it to be given out of extortion, or it to be given out of manipulation, or for it to be given out of unconsciousness. There are so many different states that it's possible to be given from. It has absolutely nothing to do with the $5,000. That has nothing to do with it. Unconditional love is just the question of, are you connected to God or not? If you're connected to God, well, God is the ultimate divine love energy. Like, that is the purest source of love. So you can have the same action that is being taken, but in infinite different states. Or if you watched Confidence Codes recently, I talk about this in the body image module, where I talk about, well, you can eat a salad from a space of punishment. So this is a misnomer to call eating a salad a loving action if it's completely devoid of love. If it's completely absent from that connection to God, you can't call it a loving action. In this example, it's a punishing action. It's coming from an energetic space of punishment. So the love piece is a matter of your heart connection to God, right? How connected are you to your heart space? How tuned in are you to your heart space? How tuned in are you to God? Because those two things are going to help you identify whether or not you are taking loving action if you're operating from that divine unconditional love, or if you are operating from something else funky, something else that isn't going to produce good results. Coming from unconditional love is a guarantee to produce good results. Okay, so let me tell you a story. It's going to apply to this unconditional love conversation that we have going on. And then we're going to wrap up this episode. So a couple of years ago, my two younger sisters came to visit me. And they were only with me for about a week. And during that time, my youngest sister made the decision to live with me. She was like, okay, I want to live with you. This is good for me. And keep in mind, neither of my sisters are 18 yet. So at the time, I knew that this was something we had been discussing as a possibility. And after about a week of her saying, yeah, I want to live with you, she changed her mind and said, actually, I think I'll be fine if I go back home. That's what I want to do. And of course, I let her know what I think, and I explained to her what I thought would happen and all of that stuff. I gave her my full thoughts, right? She still remained clear in her decision, and I said, okay, I fully respect your choices. And from that point, I allowed her to fully feel the effects of her decision. So the decision initially was, Sydney, I want you to be responsible for me until I turn 18. That was originally how I had it in my mind. Once she made the decision to move back in with her dad, from that point forward, it was, you are 100% choosing your father to be your guardian now, in this moment. And that means he is going to be your guardian and he is going to be 100% responsible for you. And that's the way this is going to be now because this is the choice you've made. So he is supposed to come pick her up on a Friday. Car breaks down. There's all this drama. Okay. Now he is through text message because he won't talk to me over the phone. So through text message to my sister, he is trying to get her to get me to drive my sister and drop him off to where his vehicle is broken down. Now, there are some of you who are listening to this right now who, at the first sign of pressure, would have folded like a cheap chair. And you would have felt, I'm uncomfortable that they're wanting things from me and I know I can do it, but I really don't want to do it, so I'm going to do it. And you would have violated yourself in this moment. Now, for me, how I handled it was, what is really the most unconditionally loving action now? What can I do now to flow the most love. Now, don't get me wrong, this was tough. My little sister is bawling, crying hysterically. She is devastated. She is feeling pressure. She's feeling her older sister who isn't cooperating. Okay? There's a lot of stuff going on. And I'm in this position where I look like the asshole. I look like a complete asshole. Straight up. And there was something in my gut that was adamant, and it said, do not take her. Do not take her. Do not leave her with him. Don't do it. Don't do it. It was such a strong, visceral impulse that I could not ignore it. There was, even though, of course, I had the thought of, what if I just took her? And I was immediately pulled into this feeling of don't do it. And that's really hard to ignore when you have a feeling that is that strong and that is pulling you that hard. And I remember how I handled the conversation. I sat down, she was crying really bad, and I told her, I said, I love you so much. Really, I love the shit out of you. And I also want you to feel the full effects of the choice that you're making today. And I want you to know that if you are going to choose this as your guardian, that this is what this is going to come along with. And these are the types of problems that are going to be commonplace in your life. And this is the type of issue that you're going to be facing a lot, because it would. Because car problems and running out of gas happen every day. And I also told her, I want you to know that there are 50,000 solutions to picking you up, and you are worth all of those 50,000 solutions that he could find today. You're worth grabbing an Uber for, coming and picking up, getting a hotel for the night, and getting his truck fixed tomorrow. You're worth that. You're so worth it. You're worth getting a cab for. And I listed out all of these different solutions, and I told her to her face, I said, you are worth all of those things. And if I were your guardian, I would do any one of those things to come get you. Really. Because that's how I handle my shit. Now, I can't make this gentle on you because you need to feel the reality of your dad being your guardian. You need to feel what that's like, even if it's shitty. And I'm so sorry. I'm sorry that this is happening, and I know this is really hard, and you can absolutely be mad at me if you want, and I can handle it. Now, listen, because there are some of you who are having a reaction to what I did and saying, that is ridiculous. You should have helped the parent. You know, if you are going to be involved at this level with someone, you know, kind of like a co-parenting thing, I want to be clear, that's not what this situation was. That's not what this situation was. So if you're in a very triggered state about maybe you being in a custody situation with your ex or something like that, I just want you to know that's not what was happening here. This was not a custody thing. This wasn't a split custody issue. I'm the older sister. I was going to be the full-time guardian of my younger sister, okay? So the context is completely different, and I was not about to violate my intuition or ignore my intuition. That's completely off the table. In the moment, if you're wondering, did I feel uneasy about what I was doing? I felt uneasy a little bit, but I felt clear. So that's the thing. I felt the clear knowing like a lightning bolt that was striking my body. That's how clear my decision making was, and me knowing what I had to do and why I had to do it, and letting her feel the consequences of her choices was really important in that moment, even if it made me look like the bad guy. But that all of those pieces were really crucial. So anyway, she finds another way to get home. Okay? So this is something, it's like the next day she finds a way, makes it happen. I drop her off. Good. Now let's fast forward 2 years. I just found this out recently, actually. That day, when I said no, and I looked like the asshole, but I was really clear, and I was doing my best to choose the most loving action in that moment. Get this. Had I not listened to myself, had I not been the asshole that day, I unknowingly would have been dropping my youngest sister off at a meth den where she would have had to stay with meth dealers and drug addicts and a meth head and been trapped there for 4 days. Alone. With no one to care for her. And I know her, and she would have been too afraid to tell me what was going on, and I wouldn't have been able to get her. So, yeah, I can say with a lot of confidence that day was one of the most loving things that I've ever done. Even if I looked bad, and even if I didn't fully understand my choice in the moment, now I do. Because I would not have been able to stomach, yes, I'm crying, the information that I dropped my little sister off at a meth den. And hear this. Sometimes the loving action looks a little bit like fuck your dad. And no, I'm not gonna let you do that. And no, we're not doing that today. And no, I've got a bad feeling about that, and it's just a no. And I can't explain it right now fully, but maybe I'll be able to later. Because that visceral reaction that I had to do not take her, don't do it. It didn't feel quite like love, but it was up there in the same frequency in terms of clarity. And for me, personally, unconditional love in that moment looked like not betraying my own intuition. And it looked like putting my foot down and being prepared for battle. That's what it looked like for me that day. And it looked like pissing off her entire family. And it looked like being perceived as the ultimate villain in this story. And it looked like telling my sister too damn bad when she's staring at me with tears in her eyes. So what you call unconditional love doesn't always look like giving people what they want. It just doesn't. This is also what makes parenthood complicated for a lot of people. Because there's this conflation between unconditional love as being nice. That's also not quite right. Like I said, the unconditional love is you being tapped into God. That's where the unconditional love, that's where the clear decision making comes from. That's where understanding your own boundaries. That's where understanding what's your yes and your no. That's where it comes from. Now, if I was really disconnected from my heart, and if I wasn't doing that from a loving place, if I wasn't doing that from, I love you, I want you to feel this. I want you to know what happens when you make this choice, and it's okay for you to learn things even if it's the hard way and even if it's painful, that's okay. It's okay for you to learn like that. That's love sometimes. Me not interfering with your growth is love sometimes. Me staying out of the way, me letting you experience the effects of your choices is love sometimes. And I will also say that there are other occasions where helping someone out or making it more gentle or being a helping hand or making things easier could be the loving action. And there might be a different situation that comes up down the line where that's true for me as well, where that actually comes up and there could be a story that emerges from that. But in that moment, not that day. And what's even crazier is even though I was willing to be the villain in that moment with my youngest sister, and I was willing to piss off an entire family, and I was willing to look bad, and I was like, I'll take the bullet. I just will. There's something about this situation where I will take the bullet and I don't care. This is right for me. This is right for you. This is right for the situation. This is right for the moment. And it took me 2 years to find out why I had that response. And now I can look back on it and I can tell you this story and I can say without a shadow of a doubt that that was the most loving thing that I could do that day. And in the process of it, I let her know she was loved along the way and she mattered and she was worth it. So remember, unconditional love is not always conventional people pleasing. It's just not. It looks different in every situation. And this is why we can't always have some type of tactical, strategic handbook for everything, because a lot of the time you're flying by the seat of your pants and you're just having to consult your own relationship with your own source and ask, what is the most unconditionally loving action I can take today? Or how do I handle this situation from a place of love? How do I do that? What does that look like in this situation that isn't necessarily comfortable or isn't necessarily easy? And you have to trust that the unconditional love result or response or decision or whatever, or way of saying something is going to give you the best results. Because that day 2 years ago, I got the best results that I could, given the circumstances and given the situation. It was the safest result. It was the best result. It was absolutely divine intervention moving through me because of how tapped in I am. You can't have what you would call a divine intervention if you're not tapped into the divine. You just can't, because you're unplugged from it. So let me finish this story. I haven't actually been public with this, but I feel called to share it here for my podcast listeners. I did end up getting guardianship over... It's making me emotional. Okay, I can talk. I ended up getting guardianship of my youngest sister. So she will be with me until she's 18. She can't go back on her decision. And because of all of the things that happened that day and beyond, and the clarity that came from her being in a really horrible situation, what ended up happening is there was no longer a mystery about what is best for her. And she became really clear about what the best move was for her. And of course, to me, it was like, duh, living with me is obviously like, there's no contest. Like, I am literally the best adult in your life, period. No, it is like an objective fact that I am the best adult in your life. And I'm the most capable for this role. Like, that was something that was just so clear to me. But she didn't know that until going through her own lessons, through seeing it for herself, through deciding for herself and getting to that conclusion on her own. Her having that experience has made her trust me more, has made her more receptive to my guidance, has done a lot for the entire situation. So there are no errors in any of this. It was absolute divine perfection. She now has a safe, healthy home with the lights on and food on the table. Like, this is a happily ever after situation. So I just thought I would share that with all of you. And that's a wrap. That's a wrap for this episode. This went in places that I wasn't expecting, and I'm so happy that it did. And if anything that I've mentioned today, the lost teachings of Marilyn Monroe, anything else interests you, it will be in the description box or the show notes. I appreciate you all. I love you all. Seriously, you're the best. And I will talk to you next time. Have a good one. Bye-bye.